Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, saving money on royalties by recording a new master of your 1986 hit single, or else a scrappy upstart, saving money on royalties by releasing your album on Bandcamp Friday, this is your show, because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the second Friday of April 2021, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Lionel who drove a 1997 Volvo S70 with a Tool bumper sticker, and who was always trying to sell you Chips Ahoy cookies laced with opiates. And old Lionel would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now. You guys, that's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free. It's a wonderful product. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'll be over on my YouTube channel for Sunday Songs. Sunday Songs is a live stream. I'm live every Sunday night. I'm playing tunes. I'm taking requests in the live chat. I'm taking questions in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. We're building something of a community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. Every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Head to YouTube and search for Joe Pug, or go to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter or for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you don't have to pay for, but that you just choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a couple of bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's already done that. If you're not in a position to do that, I totally get it. I've been there before. You could still help out our show in a couple of ways. First, you could leave us a review in the iTunes store. Or second, you could just tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. It was a pleasure to talk to Michael and Tanya last month, and I really hope that you enjoy our conversation. Our guests this week had musical stories of their own that eventually intersected with one another and became more than the sum of their parts. The War and Treaty is a musical partnership composed of Michael Trotter Jr. and Tanya Blount. Michael was enlisted in the Army and served in the Iraq War, where his musical talent was noticed and encouraged by his officers, who entreated him to compose songs for fellow soldiers killed in combat. Tanya began her musical journey as a child when she was cast alongside of Lauryn Hill in the cast of Sister Act 2. That early break led to a major label record deal for her and some industry interest. But it wasn't until the two of them paired up that they took the national stage as composers and performers. As The War and Treaty, Michael and Tanya have been championed by the likes of Buddy Miller and Emmylou Harris. They've shared the stage with John Prine, Al Green, and Elvis Costello, and they've enlisted studio performances for their albums by Jason Isbell and Jerry Douglas. In 2019, the Americana Music Association named them their Emerging Artist of the Year. In 2020, Folk Alliance International named them Artist of the Year. And they also turned in a performance for the 2020 Grammys ceremony. They record for Strong World Entertainment and Rounder Records. This summer, they will hit the road playing amphitheaters in support of John Legend. Rolling Stone describes their music as superb country soul arrangements and powerful statements of devotion. NPR says their music bears a powerful testimony. And the Associated Press says that they keep soaring past expectations. I caught up with Michael and Tanya on the phone last month to hear about their journey so far. Michael and Tanya from The War and Treaty, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. I guess we can start this interview by agreeing with one another that the best things in life and the best people in life all come from Prince George's County, Maryland. Can I get a yes on that?
Yes, you can. All day long, TV in house.
You won't get a yes out of me on that, but yeah, sure.
Oh, it's Cleveland talking.
Now, here's what's funny. When we first met a couple years ago, for some reason, Michael, I thought you were from the area as well, but then I learned, getting ready for this interview, that you're originally from Ohio. Can you talk a little bit about your journey as a kid, what your childhood was like, just personally, and then also musically?
Yeah, man, totally. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I spent a lot of time back and forth between Cleveland as well as Maryland. So my ties to Maryland are extremely strong as well. But growing up in Cleveland was pretty roller coasterish, if you will, just going up and down a lot in the times, from the 80s and 90s. And I had a pretty tough childhood, but a pretty outstanding childhood musically. And that toughness kind of shaped where I would come from in regards to a writing standpoint musically. So that's really how I would look at Cleveland. I mean, I came up in the era of Bone Thugs and Harmony, a lot of the Gerald Levert, Steve Harvey, and the comedy side of things, and when you think of Cleveland, you think of the Great American Rib-Off, the barbecue, and it's just some of the things that we hold true to in Cleveland, and being a good old Cleveland Cavaliers fan at the time of the old Cleveland Cavaliers, Craig Elo, Larry Nance, Hot Rod Williams, Brad Daugherty, Mark Price, Gerald Wilkins. That was my squad, and just really, really enjoying my time. And then we moved to D.C. in '96, and that was a shocker.
In what way?
DC is a whole nother monster, man. DC has its own culture. It's like a a lot of people make fun of DC. It's like just a district. It's not, it's the capital of the U.S., that kind of thing. But DC is like its own country in America. I mean, it has its own music that was created by its own person from DC. Chuck Brown, Go-Go, and really just the culture of mumbo sauce with chicken wings, and the culture of beating your feet to the go-go music, and their language. The first time I realized that if someone says they're going to steal you, it didn't mean that they were going to take something from your body. It means that they're going to punch you in the face. And so this kid in school told me he was going to steal on me. And I was like, man, I ain't got no money. What do you mean, steal? And pow, right in the kisser. So, DC was just a shocker. But in 96, DC also introduced me to an angel, which was the love of my life, and which is Tanya. And I met her in 96. She met me in 2010. So DC was the end-all, be-all for me in many, many different ways.
Well, explain that to me. How did you meet her in 96, but she didn't meet you till 2010?
My mother purchased a movie, Sister Act 2, and I didn't get a chance to see Sister Act 2 until I was in 1996. And Tanya was in that movie. She had filmed that long before 96. And I saw her, and I was like, there's nothing finer in life than Tanya Blount. And every part of her spoke to me as a little guy. And I just proclaimed at that moment to my mother, my father, my brother, sister, that no matter what, I was going to marry Tanya Blount. At some point, it didn't matter. I was going to marry her. And that's what I mean by that. I met her in 96, and she didn't meet me until 2010.
Well, yeah, and what's 14 years in the scheme of things, right? It went by with the blink of an eye. So, Tanya, explain to me, you're growing up in Prince George's County, Maryland. I don't exactly associate, our area here as, the place, Tinseltown, where big, huge studio movies get made. Explain how you had that career as a child actor and singer on the big screen.
Well, being from Prince George's County, there were at that time a lot of artists, friends of mine who we were just children or teenagers or whatever, and we all kind of were doing, well, they were doing what they were doing professionally, and I was hanging around them. My brother, who's actually still in Prince George's County, Willie Blount, he was really big in the moving around the R&B and gospel sector. So his friends were people like Johnny Gill and who we know as Genuine now, and Stacey Lattisaw, who had toured with Michael Jackson, and by the time she was in her 20s, she'd well over 13 albums. So these were people that were just around, and Stacey had a management company. Actually, her tour manager at that time, his name was Bob Pitts. He was friends with Stacey and introduced me to Stacey Lattisaw as, of course, Willie Blount's little sister. And Stacey heard me sing, and she had mentioned that she was with a company in New York. And so they heard me sing. And from there, I ended up signing with the production company that Stacey Lattisaw was signed to. Mm. And they had mentioned that there was a movie that a couple of artists were auditioning for at the time. So, I had just signed my record deal. I was 17, fresh out of high school. Actually, I wasn't even fresh out of high school because we graduated on the movie set of Sister Act 2. And I auditioned for Sister Act 2 along with all the artists at that time who were big-time artists like Brandy and Monica and Shanice Wilson and the unknown Lauryn Hill at the time, who was just on Young and the Restless. So I went up to New York, auditioned for that, and ended up being one of the top 7 of the girls that were going out for the role of Rita at that time. Mm-hmm. And I went to L.A., and it came down to Lauren and I, and Whoopi Goldberg kind of, she took to me and felt like I should have a stronger scene in the movie. and ended up writing that scene with Lauren and I in the movie. And so that's kind of how I ended up just even being seen on that screen. You saw something in me, and they ended up writing that scene with Lauren Hill and I.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of, that's pretty heady stuff for a high school student there. I mean, what did it feel like? Was it intimidating? Was it exhilarating? Was it all of the above?
I think when you don't know, it's exciting.
Yeah.
I didn't have any clue of what to expect. So I didn't go in like some of the child actors and actresses as, I have to get this role. I was in a performing arts school, at the time. And I just loved what I was doing. I loved music. I loved being around the arts. I loved the fact that this was a movie where even though I couldn't dance, I could become this triple threat that I told myself I wanted to become: singing, dancing, and acting,
Mm-hmm.
And I love the sound of music. So the movie, and it was excitement, all around excitement for me.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing. I'm going to take most of this kind of chronologically between the two of you guys, so that we can kind of see how your two stories eventually come together. Around that time, Michael, you graduate from high school and you join the military right at the height of the war in Iraq. Can you talk about how you ended up in the military? And I know that you've probably told this story enough times that you have become blue in the face, but I would love for you to recount for our listeners how you found music while you were stationed overseas in a theater of war.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Joe, for giving me the opportunity to tell this story differently.
Okay.
Because I have shared this story in the past, but more as me joining the military out of desperation versus me joining the military out of eagerness to take care and provide for a blessing that had come my way, which was my daughter.
Mm.
My daughters actually, Michaela, my oldest baby, she was born in 2001. And at that time, I wasn't serious. I hadn't gotten serious about my life. I had dropped out of high school. High school was boring to me. School was a touchy subject for me. I had a lot of things going on mentally. So I dropped out of high school about 3 weeks into the 9th grade. And my father at the time, he just said, well, you got to go to work and you got to get a GED. And Maryland wasn't giving out GEDs. Maryland was making you take a test, and you had to go to some college prep classes, and you had to go into some GED prep classes at the community college around there. And if you pass it, the Maryland will give you a Maryland State high school diploma. And that was a little bit different than a GED. So my dad was like, that's what you're going to do. And I did it. And then I had the baby. And I looked at that baby when I held her. And I made her a promise that she would not have to struggle. And that I was going to do the right thing. And I went on ahead and went down to the recruiting station out over there in Silver Spring, Maryland, on Georgia Avenue. And I said, hey, I want to join. I want to sign up. I want in. Now, I wasn't thinking about we were in the middle of a war. The war had kicked off. I wasn't thinking nothing like that. The only thing I was thinking of was love, which was my daughter. And I wanted to take care of her. So I joined. And then once I get there, once I realized I'm about to go to Iraq, I was like, holy hell, you mean tell me I'm going to war? So it hit me then, and during the basic training, I had learned that I was going to have another sweet daughter, my baby Courtney, which is my youngest daughter. So the military was my way of service to my daughters instead of my country. And it soon turned into a love for my country and how I wanted to have honor, and I wanted to stand and serve, and I wanted to be a good representative. So I wasn't just in Iraq to fight. I was in Iraq to understand. I was meeting the Iraqi countrymen and women, and we were feeding them. We were clothing them. We were talking with them. And quite frankly, honest with you, Joe, we were becoming more and more familiar as neighbors in my unit. But it always takes one situation to turn that, to turn something from a peaceful, calm thing to a situation where someone's got to get killed, war.
Yeah.
And that happened. And that happened right in front of my eyes. So at that point in time, that started happening more frequently. And I was ready to get out and continue my good in my country and above and abroad, you know. And that has been my military story. There you have it.
It's interesting. It's there's nothing becoming a father and seeing that helpless little baby come into the world. There's nothing that will make you want to be responsible quicker than that. I don't think I ever would have grown up if I didn't have kids.
Yeah. It is a mistake that I've made in making my military service about the guts and glory and not the honor part. And so many of our men and women who serve, they have the same story I have. They screwed up their life, and they're looking for a way to get some honor. And I was looking for a way to get some honor and to be an outstanding young man who was willing to take care of his family. And shout outs to my daughters, because without them, I don't see Michael Trotter Jr. getting there either. I don't see me getting to a Tanya either,
right.
Without taking those routes.
Now, Tanya, at that time, between when you had been in the Sister Act movie and before you would meet Michael for the first time later in life in around 2010, what did life look like for you at that time? Did you continue to pursue a creative career? Did you go in a different direction? What did that period of time look like for you?
I was definitely into the creative career. I released a record right after the movie came out. So I signed a major record deal, and actually 3 major record deals within that time frame. But I kind of just really lost a sense of that joy I mentioned to you when I was auditioning for Sister Act 2. It became more of a business, you know, and even though it is a business, the fun was gone from it for me. And instead of you just making a great record, when you're inside of that system, it becomes making a record that can sell. I mean, you know, you're not just in the studio vibing and going to put the record out that makes you feel good. You now have to think about the charts and the money they're putting behind you. So all the pressure started to kind of, you know, fall on me. And I really lost my zeal for it. But I did stay creative. I was still writing for artists, and I ended up signing with Sean Combs at the time, that people now know as Puffy or Love or Diddy, and learned a lot during that time frame of what it means to be an artist and what it means to, if you're going to be in the record selling business, the things that you have to do. And I remember sitting down with him one day and just saying, this isn't really what I want to do. You know, I want to do something different where it doesn't, the stress of it all isn't on selling records. So, you know, we mutually walked out of that deal, and I went on to still do creative things in the church sector, where I was teaching worship to worship teams around the country. And surprisingly, I went to hair school because I always loved the field of cosmetology. So I spent some time in Florida doing that. And then I met Michael.
Right on.
Right on. And it not only did his personality recharge me, his music, when I saw him on the stage out in PG County in Lower Maryland, at a Love Fest, I was immediately, when I saw him on the stage performing, I was like, who is this guy? And where does this excitement come from? that I once had, so I had to know him, not just as a musician, but as a human being.
And what did that meeting first look like? Did you guys start making music together? Did you start pursuing each other romantically first? Like, how did that whole, how did your meeting? I mean, we've worked up now 20 minutes to this huge meeting of the minds between the two of you guys.
Yeah.
What was that like when you guys first met?
Well, he was performing, and I remember running across the field after he performed. As you know, Joe, I like to wear my heels and stuff, and my heels getting stuck in the grass. But I had to meet him, and I ran over to him. He was with his friend at the time, and I bought 5 CDs because he had a CD that he was selling out there. Mm-hmm. And I gave him my phone number, and we, he threw my number away because he didn't think I was serious. But I found his number, and I wanted him to write for my brother and I, who were at that time, we were working on a Christian duet project.
Okay.
And so Michael, I'd invite him over to my house and told him my story and what I would like to see happen. And he had never really written for anyone before. And I think it was maybe like 24 hours later, he called me back and he had 12 and 13 songs already written, already produced, ready to go for my project with my brother. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't normal,
Right.
And we started rehearsing and going over the songs. And my brother didn't make a couple of rehearsals because he, of course, has a job and his own family, so he couldn't make the rehearsals. And Michael would demo the songs. And a friend of ours heard it one day and was like, do you guys hear this? And we were like, no. And we got married, and we didn't think anything else of it. We didn't sing together for 3 years into our marriage. We were like totally enthralled with one another just as human beings. I don't think we sang a lot at all.
Yeah.
And 3 years into the marriage, we started doing music together.
Now, Michael, is that how you remembered it, that you played a gig so good that you had a woman running across a field in heels just to give you her phone number?
I remember it slightly different. I remember I played a gig so bad that I had a woman running over out of sympathy trying to help me. No, I can't remember much from that day because I was so smitten at the fact that I finally was able to meet a point in my life that Tanya brought hope to me in '96 when I really needed hope. Because the part of the story I left out was in '96, I was living in a house of roof homeless shelter for battered women and children. My mom and dad had hit an all-time low in their relationship, and my mother needed to get away. And so she took me, my younger brother, my younger sister, and she escaped to D.C. And the most joyous, peaceful times I remember in my household growing up was when my mom would put on Sister Act 2. And we would go to the scene where Tanya and Lauryn Hill were singing His Eyes on the Sparrow. And me and my mom would reenact that part. And she'd be Lauryn and I'd be Tanya. And so when I met Tanya, immediately my mind skipped back to those moments, those times when I was looking at her and just wanting to know her. Times, though, when my mother needed relief and we would use her. That's all I thought of, man. That's where I was, and now I'm face to face with my relief, with my release, and there's Tanya, and I was ready. I was ready to do whatever she had wanted me to do. And Tanya could have told me to put a bowl of those apples on my head and try to run around that whole park, and I would have tried it. It didn't matter what it is. And, yeah, that's the truth.
Michael and Tanya's personal and professional journeys have a nearly unbelievable range of experience, from the depths of despair to the heights of achievement and back down again and back up again. When we're young, a part of us naively looks forward to a time when that fluctuation of fortune stops. It looks forward to the time of some great plateau of contentment and accomplishment. But that credulous projection is just as deluded as a child believing in magic. And there's a wonderful poem by the poet Kaveh Akbar that speaks to the necessary variety of human experience, entitled River of Milk. Bear with me. It wasn't long ago I was brainless, lazily pulling fireflies into my teeth, chewing them into pure light. So much of me then was nothing I could have fit into a sugar cube. My body burned like a barn full of feathers. Nothing was on fire, but fire was on everything. The wild mustard, the rotting porch chair, a box of birth records, eventually even scorched earth goes green, though beneath it the dead might still luxuriate in their rage. My ancestor was a dervish saint, said to control a thick river of dark milk under his town. His people believed he could have spared them a drought. They ripped him to pieces like eagles tearing apart a snake. Immediately, they were filled with remorse. Instead of burying him, they buried a bag of goat bones and azalea. My hair still carries that scent, my eyes, black milk, and a snake's flicking tongue. Does this confuse you? There are so many ways to be deceived. A butcher's thumb pressed into the scale, a strange blue dress in a bathtub, the slowly lengthening night. I apologize, I never aimed at eloquence. I told my mother I wouldn't live through the year, then waited for disaster. Sitting cheerfully on cinder blocks pulled from a drained pond, tossing peanuts to squirrels, this is not the story she tells. Hers filled with happy myths, fizzy pistons, and plummy ghosts. It's true, I suppose. You grow to love the creatures you create. Some of them come out with pupils swirling, others with teeth. So eventually you guys do start, you spend, you say about 3 years of married life without maybe making too much music with one another. And at some point that changes. Obviously now you guys are in a wonderful position as a band and as a business. But what was the big precipitating change that led you guys to both sing with one another? And then what was the break that happened for you that allowed you to turn it into the successful business that it is now? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like Tanya said, her brother couldn't show up to a couple of the rehearsals. So I would be Willie, so that she could hear how the songs were going, so that she could hear where they would harmonize and she can hear where she fit. And one rehearsal in particular, it was a very intimate song called I Am Love. And I sang to her, here we are in a place where time stands still for us, like that. And her role was to sing back to me, and then we'd sing together. And when I say our mutual friend, Mahogany, she paused us when we started singing together. And she said, y'all. If you know Mahogany, you understand what I'm talking about. This is exactly how she sounds. She goes, y'all, 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 y'all. And we're like, there's got to be more words than y'all.
Right.
She's like, yeah, but, and I'm like, yes, we're getting somewhere. There's another word, but. She goes, but y'all don't hear that? And she said the magic words for me. She said, I've heard you sing, and I've heard Tanya sing. She said, and y'all are so good as individuals, but when you sing together, y'all, y'all. I mean, y'all. And I knew what she was trying to say.
Sure.
So what we did was, after a while, we decided to see if we could do something together. And we had looked at different little duos and bands. We looked at a Christian band called, what do they call it, honey? That Christian band we liked, Love and the Outcome. We looked at them. We looked at Sidewalk Prophets at the time because we thought we were going to be Christian contemporary artists at the time. Mm-hmm. And we looked at them, and then, we started looking at, remember Lady Antebellum in the country world, and we started looking at, just different bands like Rascal Flatts and people who did what we liked. Mm-hmm. But I tell you what, it wasn't until we looked at this one band where the female came from the world we understood, Christian contemporary, but the dude came from Alabama, and they got together and they made magic, and they're called the Civil Wars. And we looked at them, listened to them, we were like, oh my God, what is that?
Yeah.
That's not singing. That's something we ain't never seen before. You think we could do that? We could do our own version of that. And in 2014, we started rehearsing 8 hours a day together, just trying to get our harmonies tight and our intimacy in the music. Because in the bedroom, we got it down pat. And in the common areas, we're starting to get this partnership that's solid. But in our business, musically, we were singing two different notes. And we needed to get that part straight. And Tanya and I, when we felt like we had it straight, then we were like, well, you know what? I'm tired of trying this on my own. You're tired of trying. Let's do this together. How about that? What do you say? Let's try it together. And we tried it together, and we haven't looked back yet.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing. When did you start composing for that band? Did you start composing songs specifically for that project, or knowing what the project was going to be in your mind? Did you guys start composing different music? How did the writing aspect take flight with the new project?
It's funny because I started composing when Tanya was with her brother, and I honestly was thinking in terms of, these songs really don't fit Willie; they really fit me. So subconsciously, I was already writing for me and Tanya. I just didn't know it. I was masking it with writing for her and her brother. But I had my own idea of composing for Willie separately. But once Tanya and I started to realize that we've got something that's actually a little bit deeper than just creating and composing music, we were composing a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Our harmonies would soon be used in the world in a way to unite our race. So, man, and that song we've been composing separately our entire lives. We've always wanted to see peace and unity and love, and hopefully it could eradicate this ugly fight that seemingly only happens popularly, in a popular sense, between whites and blacks. We are the band prepared for that. And so my composing, once I realized that we had a gift, and that when people see us, they see color, but they don't see segregation. They see the colors of love, but they don't see isolation. They see intimacy, but they don't see non-inclusion. I started composing music that would reflect those values. And that's where we are even as we speak, making sure that we stay true to the composing style that invites all people who are willing to come in and let it cleanse you, let it wash away some of the pains of yesterday's ugliness.
When I hear you use, you're saying that your North Star there is for this sense of unity and peace. How much of that underlying sort of moral fabric, moral mission comes from a religious place? Are you both still religious? Are you both still Christian?
Extremely spiritual, but not religious. And again, thanks for allowing us to even address this. But I think religion has confused so many people. Instead of getting it from the soul and spirit and understanding that we all have a job to do, a service to do here on the earth. And that's to serve our fellow man, even in the Bible. A question was asked, and I'm not a big Bible scholar, but I do remember a story where the homeboys, the disciples, had asked Jesus, once he explained to them he's getting ready to go, they were like, what do we do until then? Because we know the story, we know the parables, we know that you say that you're leaving and you're coming back. But what do we do while you're gone? And he says, make do. He says, love your brother, your neighbor. For how can you say you love a God who you have never, ever seen physically? And you can't love someone who you've seen, touched, and felt in this realm. So what we do is, again, we realize that we have a responsibility. So we say to folks when they come to our show, welcome to the Church of the War and Treaty, where the message preached here is love, 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 love. Love for Joe Pug, love for Steve Post, love for the cat on the corner who we don't know, love for everyone and for you and for me. It's just love. And I truly believe that if we were all enlist into that church in some formal way, fashion, we can start inching that needle forward the right way.
Talk to me a little bit about the way that I think that you guys have structured your business in a really interesting way that I would like to know about, and I know that our listeners would. As I was preparing for this interview, I noticed your latest record. It's interesting. It's not released on Rounder Records. It's released via your own record company, but via Rounder Records. I thought it was so interesting that you guys had found a way to continue to stay independent in a way with your own company that you had created, but then leverage a relationship with a larger label, a more historic label, to further your own efforts there. Can you kind of talk about how you structured your business of late and why you structured it that way?
Yeah. Tanya, once again, with her knowledge of the industry, and Tanya's sister, my wife is wise. She was adamant about maintaining ownership, adamant about making sure that we don't lose sight of who we are and that we want to find other artists who need opportunities to get those. And we just so happened to get with the label, two labels, who was willing to allow that to happen. The first label was 30 Tigers, and 30 Tigers is known for that sort of thing. But the second label was Rounder. And the president of the label at the time, John Strom, believed so heavily in us. And so it was a no-brainer that these kind of requests would be made. He was willing to do whatever he needed to do to make sure that Rounder was involved in our career at that moment. And that's just good fortune and being wise, and not forgetting the end goal and realizing that you can have what you want,
Yeah. And so, Tanya, from your perspective, after Sister Act, you said you had signed a series, maybe 3 major label deals, one with Sean Combs, one with some other labels. What did you learn from that time that you took towards your business structure now, where you said, this time Basically, what are you doing differently now that you didn't do before with those earlier deals?
Oh, I think it's like Michael said, there's ownership that happens there. And what I love about the industry now, I was very young, a teenager when I was doing music back then. And it was so hard for you to stay engaged or even know where your fans were,
Right.
So now, what I'm doing differently now is understanding that you being able to talk to your fans and engage with them and let them know what's going on, and keeping it in-house. When I say in-house, things like email list, knowing how you want your marketing to happen, using your social media platforms as a way to not just let them into your life, but also let them know, that this is your business at the same time. These are things that as artists, it's so hard for us to kind of, balance both of those worlds, to be creatives, but at the same time know that your fans know that they're your customers. They're the biggest part of why you exist as an artist. You can't exist without people buying the music. So I would say the structure for me really is now we have an opportunity to touch our fans, every day if we want to.
Right.
We have an opportunity to have email lists where if we're not signed to a label or whatever the case may be, you build these fan base so that you have an opportunity to talk to them whenever you feel like. There's not a filter like, in the past where you have to go through a label, their marketing team, in order to touch your fans, and that becomes a challenge because you don't know how much of that you should do, how little of that you should do. But I think like with any business, that's what your content calendars are for. I really live by those, and that's what you really can't market your music the way you used to, but you can have a plan on how you're going to stay in contact with your fans. So there is a structure in place that, I didn't have back then that we try to have with the Warren Treaty. And every day it's something new. We're learning our fans. They're learning us. We're figuring out what they want, what they need, and giving it to them.
It's funny, you sound so engaged and almost excited about the business aspect now, whereas you said, 10, 15, 20 years ago, the business aspect of it is what kind of bummed you out and made you go on this odyssey through, cosmetology school all the way to meeting Michael. Why do you think you're more of like a happy warrior about it now rather than, kind of a bummed out artist about it before?
Mm-hmm. I think because you realize that you're in control.
Yeah.
And people, you hear artists say, I want the control a lot, and they don't really know what that means. The control that you have it's your art. Without your art, without your songs, without your fans, these labels can't exist.
Right.
So the excitement is knowing that you're not just this artist that people are taking advantage of and telling you what to do. You actually have a choice. We were watching this movie the other day, a Hollywood Shuffle, and it was interesting because these artists, the actors were taking roles that it wasn't pleasing to their soul. And by the end of the movie, this particular character just decided, you know what? I don't really need that. I want to have a job that I'm proud of, that my integrity, when I close my eyes at night, I don't feel like I'm being taken advantage of, or I can't look myself in the mirror. And I think even as an artist, if you have to have a job that's paying your bills in order for you to do the kind of art you want to do and put into the world, then that's what you do. It's at the end of the day, it's all about you feeling like you have the control to be able to guide your creative work. And that's the excitement that I have with the Warren Treaty, even though it's not always the way you want it to be. And it takes a team of great people that believe in your art to get you there. You're still the person that's guiding this ship. You're still the person that calls the manager up and say, hey, look, I don't like that. I would like to do this. What do you think? You're always asking questions and not necessarily dictating, but it's your career. So if you don't have ideas and you don't have a creative compass of to where you want to go, that's kind of the first root of your joy, is knowing where you want to go, because these people are following you.
You know, I've always been really bad at being able to delegate and dictate things to other people. I always just end up doing things myself, and I don't think it's I think that is not a good habit to have. It sounds like you guys have really figured out a way to have a team involved and trust them to get stuff done. What do you look for character-wise in team members before you bring them on?
It's still a challenge. I wouldn't say that it's been hard to let a lot of things go. That we kind of know from doing Down to the River how, once we put it out, the fans kind of told us, not that we knew anything, the fans kind of told us what they expect when they come to a show. So you kind of listen to them. But I've found that because we're creatives, we're very emotional people. We have to be. I'm just able to sometimes balance the business hat with the creative hat, and that's a thin line, because you lose sight of the specialness of it all when you are so involved in the business side of it. But you look for character. You look for people who, one, have the same zeal that you have for your art. And everybody may not be as expressive. Everybody may not come up with marketing ideas. You may just have a person on your team who can strategize the same way you can write a song,
Right.
So you look at, in every area that you want your business to grow, what is that person's magic in that area? Is this person if there's a manager, for instance, a manager can't be as emotional as an artist, because they're going to have to hear things about you that a record label or someone would never say to you directly to your face,
Right.
So you have to have a manager who's able to hear these things, not necessarily bring them back to you to get you emotional, but they're able to balance it out and kind of give you what this person may have said about you in a way, I always say, with a little bit of honey instead of with vinegar.
Right. For sure.
So I look for whatever person that you're hiring, what is it that they have that you don't have? That's just because you market it, like for instance, I marketed Down to the River, it doesn't mean you can market Heartstown.
Right.
Our newest record. It doesn't mean that you can market the next record. So you look for the people who have been following you, who are fans of yours. Sometimes a fan is the best marketing person that you could ever have, because they know what they want to see out of you because they're your fan, Yes. And maybe that's the person you hire. So,
Man, I think it's almost a hallmark of all great musicians and musicians who are going to go on to have success is people who are really talented. They almost never know what is the most compelling part about what they do. It takes fans to see it, or it takes a really talented person in the business end to say, no. This is what people find compelling about you. And it's just crazy to me that people who can be so good at creating can sometimes have a hard time understanding what's the most compelling look. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Because you don't know, you're so close to it.
You're so close.
You're creating the music. You're with it every day. You're nurturing it. Then you put it out into the world. You're still close to it. You have to do interviews about it. So you're always just kind of consumed with your art. And the people that are listening to your art, they're not listening to your record all day long. They listen to it when they want to feel a certain way, or when they're driving in the car, or, your music is an experience for them. But when we live it, it's our livelihood,
Right.
So we're emotional about it in a different kind of way. And that's the balancing act that I realized. I remember one of the things I love about Michael, when I first started doing music, they used to call me the Duracell battery, because I would be up, all times of night, all day long, just engulfing myself in music. And I remember a legend in the R&B world now, Freddie Jackson. We were doing a session, and he was doing a song with me. And his session was like at 2:00. And he says, and we'll be finished by 3. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what does he mean he wants to come in the studio for 1 hour?
Right.
how can you cut a vocal in 1 hour? And he looked at me. He was older than me at the time, and he was like, look, I have the rest of my life to live. He was like, I give this song an hour, and we're going to cut the vocals. It's going to be great. And it really was. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But he'd been in the business so long. He had success, number one hit record so long that his urgency wasn't the same as mine. And he was like, and you'll develop a calm about how your career will unfold. You don't have to put the metal, there was a pedal to the metal and make it happen, because at the end of the day, the fans make it happen. If they like the music, they make it happen, so.
Right. And the only thing that the fans are hearing is what comes out of the two speakers. It doesn't matter to them whether you work for 12 hours or an hour. They just care about what's coming out of the speakers and if it's good or bad.
That's right. And the feel, how it makes them feel. So
these days, when you guys are writing and composing, if you have a day to work, what does it look like? Michael, are you doing much of the recording and producing yourself these days, or how does that structure look like with the two of you?
I'm doing more pre-production now, and I do that all day. I just create all day. I have no structure. I wake up, I go right into my little studio and just work and let it come, and I'm learning to give it over to a producer and get my time back.
Is that hard?
It is.
To give it over?
Very, because you want to make sure you're not giving it over because you feel that you are a failure.
Right.
But you're making sure that you're giving it over because you understand that you're not the only one that can think.
Right.
You're not the only person here. And you give it over because you really want your time back. You really want to spend time with your children, spend time with your wife, and you're just tired of doing the same thing over and over again. And I believe that's where I am. Oh, good job.
That's a good place to be. And do you find that it gives you more time? So then it sounds like you're spending the lion's share of your time just generating raw material rather than arranging or doing, further audio production stuff.
Yeah, just really arranging it and kind of like making sure I have my thoughts together on what I think this piece is and isn't, Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what the bulk of the time is.
Do you find yourself working on groups of songs, like you go through like a writing period where you find your songs tend to have a through line that you start writing to, or is it more you hit your studio every morning and whatever the spirit makes come through you comes through you?
Definitely the latter. I don't have a theme. I just write because I've lived for 38 years. So I have 38 years of living and 38 years of wanting to say something. So I haven't lived my life in themes, so why write that way? That's just the way I look at it. So I'm constantly writing in the moment, constantly writing about moments, constantly acknowledging the inspiration around me, not trying to find or be inspired, but realizing that inspiration is living around us on a day-to-day basis, second to second, minute to minute, hour to hour. If we would just acknowledge it and pay attention. So I pay attention all day, every day. And I just get up, I just go in there, and I just write and play. And I meet God wherever he is, and he shares with me his secrets, and I write.
Yeah, I've always felt that about writing. I've become more religious as I've gotten older, and so I'm more willing now to acknowledge that explicitly that it comes from a higher power. But for me, it always came from a very mysterious place, even when I was younger and very secular. Even then, I was able to acknowledge that it seemed like all the stuff that came from me was the worst stuff, and then the stuff where I couldn't quite tell you where it came from. That was that was the good stuff there. Definitely.
And I don't throw away anything. I just realized that not everything is for right now.
Right.
And yeah. But I do know what you're talking about as far as like, you know, just being more spiritually aware of what's happening and what's happening, not just around the world, because we tend to be more in tune spiritually with what's happening with everyone else, and not necessarily what's happening right inside of our own bodies. There's a world living inside of you and a world living inside of me, you know, like you say, Joe, or Tanya will say, or I will say, well, in my world, and that word that's important is in my world, in the world of Joe Pug, this is what goes on. So inside of us is a world that is influenced by our own thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to be careful and take care of that and really acknowledge that I'm changing. Really acknowledge that I'm going deeper here. I'm going into a place spiritually that I've never been. And Tanya and I, we have been acknowledging that presence for a long time. And what I will say is, Tanya's a little bit deeper than I am. I'm coming more and more into the deep awareness of who I am spiritually. And it feels good to do that and to change and to morph and to become, you know.
It does. I think it just means that me and you were just getting old, man.
Well, hell yeah. I feel that physically, but I think it's cooler to say it the way I'm saying it.
I think it is too, yeah. I'll edit that last part out. Don't worry. Well, going forward, for you guys, I know, you know, Corona has been a really big reset for everybody. You guys are now in a place where, I mean, obviously with all of us and all of our careers, you know, if you're running your own shop, you're always worried about what tomorrow brings. But I would say from the outside looking in, you guys are in a great position to do any number of things that you'd like to do career-wise going forward. So has this been a reset for you? And in any ways, as opposed to pre-COVID, have you changed what your focus is going to be creatively and as a business going forward once the world goes back to what approaches normal?
I believe that perception is everything. And it's so amazing that you feel that way about us, because we just don't see it the same way. We feel we aren't. Sometimes we feel we aren't making a mark, Joe, to be honest. Sometimes we feel that it's more important for people to invite us to the party because of our skin color, so that they can look inclusive. But I don't want to be known for my skin color. I don't want to be known for this black couple, you know, doing black country music or black folk or black, like, you know, I mean, you're not going to go down as having a white radio show,
right,
or a white podcast. So why does it have to be that way for me? And this pandemic has caused us to think more along those lines now than ever. And when you get there, man, if I can just be honest with you, just from songwriter to songwriter, it's hurtful. It's painful, and it makes you want to just sit in your little house in your bedroom and just hide. Just quit and just give up. And this pandemic has made us want to quit so many times.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been so many times where we've been told that we have to do a live stream, and then we've been told that so many people love us, and oh man, we can't wait. And we can't even get 15 people to purchase a live stream ticket.
Right.
So I think what that does is makes you be honest and say, you know, it might be like this for a minute, but you have to be so content in what you can give to those 15 that you don't care.
Right.
So now we're at a place now where we just, quite frankly, Joe, we just don't give a shit. If it's 2, if it's 15, we're going to give you what we got.
Yeah.
And we're going to give you our love. We're going to give you our heart. We're going to give you our song. And we're going to do it. And we hope that the 15 or the 3 or the 5 will get something out of it. And that's it, brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, I think if you're running your own business and you're not completely worried and paranoid at all times, that you're not doing it right. Because every small business owner I know is always worried, and I mean, God knows I am too. But I mean, I feel like every year I finish the year and I look at it, especially for the longest time, having to be on the road, and I travel without my wife, I travel without my kids, and so every year I have to come back to it, and I'm like, is this the year that I quit? Because it's not worth it anymore. And there's some people dedicated out there to what I do, and I appreciate that to the bottom of my heart. But at the same time, you got to pay for a mortgage, and got to buy diapers, and I got to buy an ungodly amount of fruit snacks apparently for these kids. But it's I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I guess I'm just trying to say that I certainly feel that way, and I think a lot of your fellow musicians feel that way right now too. Everyone's just wondering, like, does anybody care about this?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, it's really good to hear you guys. I wish I could end this conversation by saying I'll see you soon, because I'll be coming through Nashville, or you'll be coming out this way, but I don't know when that's going to be. So I guess we'll just leave it out. I'll see you when we see you.
See you when we see you, brother.
Thank you so much, Joe.
This week's show was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. The War and Treaty's latest album is entitled Heartstown, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.